Welcome, my friends, to another Alliteration Gaming video, and as always, I've got the illustrious, lovely Willy T here to present a very fun little passion project he's been working hard on for quite a while now, and that is Izuku Midoriya 2 on the good symbol. Take it away, Will.
Yeah, I have loved this character ever since he got printed. I thought he was a big tonal shift for the character name. He's a very interesting character to play. There's a lot of build up to him, and then a big payoff when you finally get there. He has a unique style where he is just building and building and building, and he's able to do it so consistently and so well that it feels like a very stable game plan to be able to play probably my favorite attack package in the game with the punch package.
Yeah, so let's go into kind of what Midoriya does. Midoriya is a pretty cool character card. He's a six-hander with 29 thick boy health, and at any point in time, you can trade cards in your hand for extra stats on your punch attacks and build in copies of foundations that you check into your stage. So he's really cool. He's kind of like an alternative to the All Might 3, just, you know, traditional, like, stable, consistent, solid Punch Planet package, but with an extra kind of side of really fast foundation ramp to him, depending on how your checks go.
Yeah, absolutely. There are many times with this deck that you're going to be able to go into 6 to 8 foundations by the end of your rival's turn 2.
Yeah, this ability being playable on both turns makes some really interesting plays happen sometimes with things like New Training Method, Manly Passionate Guy, and all in all, Midoriya 2 has a lot of really interesting tricks in his kit to really throw surprises in the opponent's face and ramp up his build faster than a lot of players are used to dealing with. So that is the game plan of this kind of Midoriya 2 deck, and let's see how our deck supports that. Going into things, we're going to start with our attacks, of course, because they are the fun part about playing Mr. Punch Man.
Absolutely. We're starting with, 4 copies, Back Alley Haymaker. Definitely the best starter card in this deck. It helps accelerate your game plan of building extra cards out of your discard or drawing more cards in order to discard them with Deku's Enhance. It's a really good card to just be able to start plays off with, and if you have multiples, you never feel bad about it because whatever you had to commit, you're kind of getting a little bit of a refund on it or going plus in the process. So it's a really stable card. It's a mid-attack that gets blocked, but that's kind of what you want. Sometimes you want that starter card to just get blocked and pull cards out of your rival's hand.
Yeah, I mean, Back Alley Haymaker is just kind of one of those cool attacks where no matter what happens, it accelerates your game plan in some way, provides you resources, gets cards out of their hand, puts them into their card pool, and just puts you closer to being able to reach your ideal stage, sculpt your proper lethal hand, or just progress the game state in any way whatsoever.
Absolutely. Next is 4 copies of Texas Smash, my favorite card in the game. I love playing this card. It is a flow card in this deck in a lot of ways because it helps you accelerate your game plan with some of the foundations that we'll be able be looking at a little bit later in the profile. But it helps you weaponize the amount of cards that are in your hand and really push for those lethal turns. This is the card you want to see in every hand when you're going to start just going out on your opponent.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think a punch deck has ever killed someone without going Texas Smash and Texas Smash, right? It's a ton of free damage that you can just throw out like crazy, and it's really the primary execution card when it comes to these punch packages, taking the rival down to 0.
Yep, absolutely. Next is going to be 3 copies of One for All, Full Cowling 5% Strike. What a mouthful of a card. This card has a couple of uses in this deck. The primary function for it is being able to discard your hand once you've been discarding everything with Deku in order to just get a little bit of a final push and then redraw 3 cards. The other function that this serves is it is an anti-Momo and anti-Kirishima card. The enhance on it to force your rival to commit their character if it is unblocked can really shut down those decks that are very defensive and rely on their character, or it forces a block out of them. This is a card that neither of those decks can afford to not answer, so it helps your matchup into those, and you build out faster than either of those 2 characters with this deck. So it's very easy for you to get ahead and then maintain that advantage.
Yeah, this card is freaking sick, has a ton of synergy with our character, is a big punch, and just almost always demands a block against the majority of the really, really good characters right now.
Absolutely, absolutely. Next is going to be 3 copies of Hardened Jab. This card is another one of those flow cards that's really going to help you kind of reset your stage. There are a lot of elements of your stage that you want to flip down a bit aggressively, such as Manly Passionate Guy, Destined for Mainstream Success, and New Training Method. And being able to pick these up is a great way to really accelerate your game plan. Some of my favorite plays are just slamming down a Hardened Jab on a 4, hoping that I check a 3 so that I can commit something and then pick it up. There's a lot of ways that you can really utilize this card to help out. I really like this card to be able to reset things, especially New Training Method.
Yeah, there's a lot of really, really strong interactions there, and it's just one of those Kirishima cards that just progresses your game state no matter how your opponent addresses it, right?
Yep, absolutely. Speaking of Kirishima cards, we have 2 copies of Hardened Chop. This card is great for ripping cards out of your rival's hand or just forcing damage through. A lot of people don't really want to block this card, so being able to discard an extra card from your hand in order to turn it into an 8 damage move that your rival's not going to block is a really good way to get some really good poke in, and then you just build out for the rest of the turn.
Yeah, Midoriya just says, like, hey, you kind of have to take 8 to the face, or give me 2 cards and leave yourself open to some Texas Smash shenanigans. Because it's like, it kind of has the Midoriya 1 syndrome, where even if you're not always putting those damages on your punch, the sheer threat of it makes your rival have to play differently. Like, hey, absolutely, I cannot go to 0 cards in hand by blocking this Hardened Chomp, because then Texas Smash can just come in and hit me for 10 into another 17 damage Texas Smash, and then it's just like, I'm suddenly deceased.
Yeah, everything gets way out of hand, and this is a card that enables that.
Yeah, real big.
Next is 2 copies of Setup Strike. I like this card to be able to make things a little bit faster. It's also a good momentum out in those matchups where you need to utilize that. But it's a good tech card to make sure that you're pushing some damage through. Following this card up with a 5% is fantastic. It's a great way to just be like, yeah, you're shutting off for the turn. I'm done with that.
Yeah, it's just a really, really great flow card. 3 speed to the next one for free is just like super strong, especially if you can like make it self-threatening, which our character certainly can.
Absolutely.
And you know, it being a high attack as well also makes the rival think like, wow, well, do I block this, or do I save my high block for the 7-speed Texas Smash coming, or the 8-speed Texas Smash coming in, and can I even block that if it comes in?
Yep. It's 2 copies of Heroic Strike. This card is great in your long strings to just commit your opponent out. It forces a lot of things that they really don't want. You don't want to see it in every hand, but once you start playing a big string, this thing just goes, cool, you're not blocking for the rest of the turn.
Yeah, this card can really easily come out of nowhere with like a stun 3, stun 4, and it's kind of crazy. It's a really, really tough one for your rival to play around, and it can come in at some really unsuspecting moments to just suddenly close out a turn, especially like with a character that can actually make it threatening damage-wise.
Yeah, especially only at 2 copies. It's definitely not something that your rival is going to just see coming every single game. And that rounds out the attack lineup.
Hey you like the My Hero Academia collectible card game, right? If the answer is at least a resounding probably, you should head right on over to unfunstuff.com for all of your MHA CCG purchasing needs. We've got the new set Heroes Clash on pre-order, as well as the new DLC 2 in stock. And if you want to use coupon code Wealthy Aspirations, you can get 5% off your entire freaking order, and also support old Levi a little bit along the way. The link for all this is going to be right down in the description below, so get on over there and go yourself some amazing product from some amazing people. Back to the video.
So let's move on to the foundation. We'll start off with 2 copies of Pull No Punches. This is your primary deadlock threat. It is a really good way to make sure that your rival is stunned out and your punches are fast, and it makes things happen. Because since you build out so hard in this deck, it encourages your rival to follow you into deadlock. Because otherwise they're just going to get out-resourced and they're not going to be able to keep up at all. So having a way to punish a gameplay loop that you are forcing them into is a good way to really execute on this game plan. And being able to clear your card pool and put things into your momentum in those matchups where people just aren't going to follow you into deadlock is a good way to make sure that you're weaponizing every card in your stage.
Yeah, this card's crazy powerful. If the rival doesn't have like a way to like defensively seal it somehow, it just walks all over them with that deadlock.
Yep. Next, the most important card in the deck.
I don't think this deck could exist without this card.
Yep. 4 copies of Passing the Torch. It draws you a card, and my favorite thing to do is draw cards. But the cool thing about playing Midoriya 2 is because of his once per turn response. Once you find 1 copy of this card and build it, you've effectively found and built them all, just throughout the course.
It's only a matter of time.
It is. It is just like Thanos. I am inevitable. You will see other copies of this card, and you were, once you build 1, you were effectively an 8, 9, sometimes 10-hander.
Yeah, it gets really crazy. Once Midoriya 2 hits like that really late game state where he's just like got like 20 foundations and all of these on board, it's like you're really just on a clock. It's just a matter of time before in his like 10 cards he sees enough of an attack string to just blow you up.
Yup. Next is my favorite card in the deck. 4 copies of New Training Method. This card is absolutely crazy with Deku 2, especially when you're running it, spoiler alert, alongside Manly Passionate Guy. One of my favorite things that will happen is I will go to block an attack during my rival's turn. I will check a copy of a foundation I already have in my stage, so I'll build it in. I'll block with the New Training Method. I'll build it down with Manly Passionate Guy, and then I'll build in something else from my hand. And I just built 3 on my rival's turn. And that just is so, A, demoralizing, and B, it advances your game state so hard. And it gets crazy.
Yeah, the ramp in this deck is like truly not to be underestimated. And like Midoriya is a big part of it, but it's really just how all of these cards kind of come along. Like New Training to support it so much, and then Passing to make that game state like of just like critical mass or resource points so out of league compared to what any other deck can do is what really make that game plan so threatening.
Absolutely. Next is 4 copies of a card that seem a little sus in any deck but this one, is Any Means Necessary. And that is the way we go about getting our wins. This card is great to discard with either Midoriya or with Texas Smash in order to be able to replace itself. And there are times where you actually want it on board. The Life Enhance on this has won me games, where I will discard myself down to nothing while I'm playing a 5%, commit my face, and then pick up 3 brand new cards while I'm getting another speed and another 3 damage on it, making it extremely threatening. So this card is pivotal for Deku 2.
Yeah, I mean, it's always live. Even if you're not attacking, you can use it on your rival's attack to just discard it and draw a card.
Yep, you can hold on to it and wait for them. If they make a build turn, you're just like, cool, I have fodder for my next. And if they do come swinging at you, it's like, cool, I'm going to discard it and just try to get a different block zone.
Yeah, it's just always going to just be a cantrip for your character.
Yep. Next, for cards that keep us alive, 4 copies of Specialist of Sound. No real need to dwell on this one's defensive potential. We're all familiar with it. The cool thing about how this interacts with Deku is when you check it, both of your responses from both Specialist of Sound and Deku are going to be able to trigger, so you kind of get to do them in whatever order you want. I tend to do the check on Specialist of Sound so I can get a peek and see what's next, so that if I want to build whatever's next in, I hold off on the response. If not, most of the time I'll build in Specialist of Sound, because keeping yourself alive is really, really easy with this deck.
Yeah, getting multiple Specialists of Sound is, just kind of almost as insane as multiple Passing Torches.
Yep.
Just being one of those cornerstone of the good symbols defense.
And being able to have like 3 and 3 consistently is very hard for a lot of decks to get through. It builds a wall.
It's a lot of speed reduction.
Yep. Next is 2 copies of You're So Obvious. This card can get used offensively since our entire deck is punches. It can also be used defensively to reset big things like Recipro Burst or Cannon Blast that are really, really threatening that we just don't want to deal with. We can reset the speed and make them super blockable, or we can reset the damage and just make it super tankable. So it's a card that really saves your bacon a lot.
Yeah, it's just really good against those decks that like to all in on certain attacks. You know, it's a nice little. You know, we don't want to run like too many non-full rubs because of the way our character works, but you know, you still want to get a little bit of tech pieces in there.
It is a bit of a fallacy that you need to run everything at a 4 of in Deku 2. You're perfectly okay running some tech choices because then you get to be more selective with your responses. But it also means that when you do run into one of those 2 ofs and you've already built one and you check the other, you're just like, cool, I'm super stable.
Neat.
Yep. Next, speaking of tech, 2 copies of Taiyaki Fanatic. This is primarily here to shut down quick creation. I really do not like having Jiros throw a 20 plus speed, 20 plus damage after a deadlock enhance on quick creation for those cannon blasts. I really don't like that.
You don't want to deal with the 40-40?
I don't. I really don't. So this is a way to shut those down, and it's also a way to rip cards out of your rival's hand when they follow you into deadlock in those situations where you're not afraid of deadlock enhances. There's a lot of symbols out there right now where you can kind of disrespect their deadlocks. But there are other symbols out there where you absolutely cannot. But this is a deck that you build into deadlock pretty much no matter what. It is part of your core game plan, so you need a bit of protection against that.
Yeah, it's just like a nice little safety net against decks that have those types of abilities that we don't really want to deal with.
Yep, absolutely. Next is 4 copies of Manly Passionate Guy. This card is another one that's very pivotal to our game plan. We like to block with a lot of things and then build them down so that we have a giant Great Wall of China to play with all of our foundations. And being able to build in with New Training Method, Passing the Torch, Specialist of Sound, anything that you want to block with, most of the time you want to build it. And it's a good way to also diversify and sculpt your stage. That's another thing that's really important to Midoriya 2's game plan, is having copies of things available for you to be able to check and then build in. There's a lot of things that like flip themselves, so you want to wait on those flips. This is not one of them. You want to flip this pretty much every time you block with something.
Yeah, Manly is just all day one of the more standout foundations of the game for sure.
It's a very strong card. Next is going to be 4 copies of High Value Target. This card's very good for keeping you alive. It keeps your Passing the Torches safe from things like Evil Gaze or Berserker Barrage. And it's a great way to keep yourself alive with blocking because it's just such a good card to block while it's in your stage. And being able to check them and build it off of Deku is like building 2 foundations instead of 1. So it's a really good way to accelerate your game plan defensively.
Yeah, especially if like they're like, okay, I've done the math. This next one's unblockable. Then you just check a high value target, build it, and it's like, well, he's got 2 more things now.
Yep, absolutely. Next is 4 copies of Destined for Mainstream Success. This is a card that helps you filter and just add more. It effectively reads draw 1 in most cases. But the thing that I really caution you against is firing them off too early. Since you are playing a character who wants a lot of different things in his stage, keeping one of them up while you're building is a good way to make sure that you can get other copies of it, because each one of these represents another card in your hand.
Yeah, makes sense. Again, just one of the most staple spams, and they're all 3 of its symbols. Just got to use it a little differently sometimes in this guy.
Absolutely. Next is going to be 3 copies of Self-Sacrifice. This is primarily here for block zones and also to be able to utilize the cards in your stage and get them elsewhere before you cycle. It's also a good way to just add a little bit of extra damage because you're going to build a ton of foundations. Being able to commit them and then blow them up in order to get extra damage can make the difference. Yeah,
also lets you manipulate yourself around deadlock a little bit in those situations where you need to. And when you're kind of in the position where I'm going in no matter what, or I might die no matter what, it's a nice fallback plan.
Yup. Next is 3 copies of Bonds of Friendship. This card, also mostly here for a block zone. It is very useful into some Fury matchups, but being a 1/6 is relevant enough in the good symbol to make the cut. I absolutely think this card is very, very good, especially with that 1+ high block.
Yeah, it just rounds out a lot of your numbers really nicely.
Yep.
Just being a 6 check, being a 1 high block.
Yeah, your block math with this deck is just so consistent. It's so easy to block almost everything. Last but most certainly not least is 4 copies of It Can't Be Fixed. This is your one and only target for Back Alley Haymaker, but it is also simultaneously the best one. And it also makes it so that if you are in a matchup where your rival does a whole lot of stunning, you basically just go, cool, you don't have the stun ability this game, because anytime I see one of these, I'll build it in with Deku.
Yeah, it's really cool too. You can do stuff like self-sacrifice, recycle them around, build them back in, find them with your
discard them with Deku for extra damage on your Back Alley Haymaker, and then build it in from the discard since you just discarded it.
Absolutely, yeah. There's a lot of utility there, and in general, just being one of the best zeros in the game, quite honestly.
Absolutely.
And so that's the whole main deck, huh, Will?
Yeah, absolutely. 20 attacks that are all pretty specifically chosen. And then the rest of its foundations. 64 cards total it's a bit of a brick, but it is a deck where you're going to see so many cards that you're going to consistently build out a fantastic stage and being able to sling so many attacks that your rival finds it very difficult to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, once you start setting up like your stage and all your card draw and your passing and all, like you're gonna find your attacks no matter what, pretty much. Mostly just kind of trying to sculpt towards that really, really big string of moves to finish them off in the end anyway.
Yep, and Deku do be sculpting. You can definitely put on some early pressure, and you can still build while you're doing it with that response, so it doesn't mean that is your only game plan, but it is very easy to just build, hit 15 foundations by the end of turn 3, and then just pop off.
Yeah, it's just your opponent's in a tough position where it's really hard for them to attack into you at that point while they're trying to catch up. And then you just get to sit there and find all of your cool attacks and eventually say just deal with like 6 or 7 punches, man.
Yep, it feels very safe. It is a very stable deck, and it's very easy to make things happen with it. The entire game plan is very streamlined.
Makes a lot of sense. Would you like to talk about your sideboard?
Absolutely. Let's start with the new addition to the sideboard is Capture Evildoers.
Very surprising not to see this in the main.
Yeah, I elected not to put it into the main deck for a couple of reasons. Firstly, it's a meta call. I actually don't think that this card is particularly good into Kirishima or Momo, and those were the primary things that I was expecting to see. And the matchups that this card is good into are not matchups that we just lose for free anyway. So having it in to be able to make those matchups easier is why it's in the sideboard. But it's not a foundation, which is why it's not in the main board. If I check this, I can't build it, and it gives away too much of what is in the deck in game 1.
Yeah, makes sense. Still a very, very, very powerful card.
Absolutely.
At the end of the day, though, it's also much more of a local meta call as well. Mm-hmm. We don't really deal with a ton of air decks, especially since I stopped playing them at our local tournaments.
That's fair, but like even in provisionals, this is as I played it in a webcam provisional, and I still felt like it was the correct call to put the Capture Evildoers in the sideboard instead. Next, everything is going to be just kind of rounding things out. So a third Pull No Punches, a third Taiyaki Fanatic, and a third You're So Obvious, so that I have those available for the matchups where they are relevant and they are going to save my life. And then I also want to round out the attacks a little bit more with a fourth 5%, a third Hardened Chop, a third Heroic Strike, and a third Setup Strike. There are some matchups where Heroic Strikes don't do that well, so I'll put in an extra Chop and an extra Setup Strike. Or I'm against a Kirishima or a Momo, I want that fourth 5%. So being able to just swap up the attack lineup, rotate things in and out, and be able to apply a little bit more pressure with things that are a little bit more matchup dependent is really, really good in this deck, and you have that luxury with the sideboard. Yeah,
this card's just so good against like defensive reliant characters. This card's good against decks without card draw. This one's good against really board reliant decks, and this one just kind of fills out decks that don't have like a lot of speed hate, like things like the Earth symbol.
Yep, absolutely. It's a great way to just round things out and make things a little bit more nuanced.
Yeah, I mean, this deck is very much like built and centered around its game plan, so you don't really want to side alternate strategies as much as you want to just kind of round out some of your numbers with things you want to see a little more depending on who and what you're dealing with.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is a really tuned deck. It is very, very streamlined, and it's so capable of blowing people out. I love playing it. It is a ton of fun, and you just feel like an absolute monster being able to go, I have 20 foundations, I have 3 passing the torches, I have 2 enemies necessary in my hand, and the rest of this is all citrus. Let's go.
Yeah, I think people disrespect the ramp and then the subsequent backswing when they realize, there's just nothing stopping him from playing like 7 attacks this turn because he's got stage in hand for days.
Yep.
Midoriya 2 is a little bit of a resource monster, man.
He is. He is incredibly efficient with everything that he does. One of my favorite things that will ever occur was against a friend of mine. I blocked with a new training method, checked a passing the torch, used Deku to build it in, built down the new training method with Manly Passionate Guy, and built in a You're So Obvious. It felt so disrespectful to just go, I built 3 on your turn. What are you going to do about it? And I've got an extra card available to me because of it.
Yeah, I think Deku 2 has a lot of things going for him with really cool plays like that. You know, making him like a little bit more of an alternative to something like All Might 3 that just kind of, and Kiri 2, which kind of like, you know, ramp in their own ways, whereas he's just much more of like a really, really, really stable, consistent resource machine. With the only real factors heating that is just how your checks go.
Yep.
Right?
Absolutely. He lives and dies by the checks, but that's also why you can afford to go a little thinner on the attacks, so that you have more consistent foundation checks.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for showing off this this really, really sweet Midoriya 2 deck. There's definitely a handful of fights on the channel already featuring this deck. There's going to be more to come in the days going forward. And of course, probably going to see some very cool updates to this deck once set 3 rolls around.
Absolutely.
Well, that's all the time we've got today. Thank you again, Will. We're looking forward to seeing you guys in the next video. This has been Levi and my boy, Willy T, Midoriya 2 himself, signing off.